Okay,
Okay,
thank you.
there you go. So I was going to say, in terms of how you prioritize your work, you want to not only talk about what you do at a high level, but also how do you deal with that, especially when you have a lot of things to deal with on a day-to-day basis. So that's the response you give me doesn't really help me answer that.
Okay.
Like, you will have 50 things to go do today. What are the things you would go do based on the priorities that we have, right? And that's really where it will help me kind of see the meat of how you engage with on a day-to-day basis with engineers, with management, with your direct manager, and just generally from a team standpoint.
Okay. So I can talk about stuff at a high level and then also literally how I prioritize my work day to day.
Yes, and even the tools that you use. So maybe you're using, I know people use Notion, you're using Organizer to track your work, you're using Docs, Google Docs, things like that. You can also mention, like, that way it shows like you're very hands-on kind of a guy who manages this kind of things day-to-day basis.
Okay, that makes sense. Yeah, I have not been mentioning that. Okay.
So that's just one example of it. I think you can even give an example that you can see in most cases, being a PM, you can also give an examples of how you prioritize and manage. So you could say that, hey, at work, we are currently working on this particular product. And for me, the biggest priority is to make sure that this gets delivered. So a lot of my focus is really to make sure that I work with the team. I talk to them, like whatever your deliverables are, and what the team's deliverables are that you are helping accomplish. So you can give an example. Like generally, for all in PM questions, try and see if you can give your real world examples. That way, hey, this guy really has gone through some of these on a personal level and really understands it.
Gotcha.
So that would be my response. Like that would be my feedback to you.
Okay. Yep. That makes sense. Yeah, I have not been doing that. Thank you.
Okay. So now, what was the second item?
Oh, a time that I failed.
Yeah. Let's talk
Okay.
about that.
Cool. So as a PM, I often work on sort of our platforms and integrations. And one of the integrations that we decided to build a connector to was the Eloqua marketing platform from Oracle. So one of our executives was in close contact with an executive from the Oracle platform and started building out that partnership. And from the beginning, in our technical calls, I realized that Eloqua is much larger and much more complex of a platform than we were used to working on. This is because of the data models that Eloqua used for their objects, and then the amount of customization that an end user in Eloqua was capable of in like sort of tweaking their own Eloqua system.
Okay.
And all of their customers lean towards like the larger enterprise level size, right?
Yeah.
So I was hesitant on how long even a minimum viable product would take for us to develop, but along with it, I listened to orders from the executives, and I started to scope out the project with the engineering team, and we got to work on it. From the beginning, we saw potential issues and complexity, and I brought this up with the executive, right, but it was shot down. So I urged my own technical lead to continue, and we ended up implementing the solution, but with a lot of very convoluted business rules to accommodate the product, right?
Yeah.
And as we neared completion, I had a very difficult time onboarding a customer for a beta because these enterprise level customers were extremely hesitant because they sometimes would have like terabytes of data in the platform, right?
Okay. Yeah.
We were only able to beta one customer before launch. So after that, we launched, the first paid customer had constant complaints about the platform, partly due to because of how heavily they customize their system, right? And we were worried about this at the beginning, but we were urged to push onwards. Don't stop to fix it because of like, we were worried about sunk costs, right? So the first year we did not come close to hitting our revenue goals or number of customers onboarded. It was only after that we were able to convince them to sort of scale back some of the features and put more limits on our own software that we saw more customer satisfaction. So through all this, I actually hurt trust with my engineering lead, right? Because we all saw the warning signs, but I went ahead with it anyways as a product manager, right? We also failed to meet the initial deadline due to the complexity. And then I also hurt our initial customer, because of all their problems with their onboarding. So that was hurt our relationship with them through as Bumbora, right?
Mm-hmm.
So through this, I absolutely learned that I can't cave in to pressure from above me or even pressure from a partner like Oracle, right? When I see that there are large uncertainties that it could affect the success of the platform. I should have either advocated we spend more time speaking it or even a different platform, or definitely tried to scale back the features that we plan to implement for an MVP, right?
Mm-hmm.
I learned the importance of having a product that you can easily beta and get feedback on. Before you release it to the general public, right? So it was an experience that was an initial failure, definitely, but from a product management perspective, it provided a lot of valuable lessons for me.
Got it. Okay, awesome. So I think you kind of covered some of the questions based on your own experience. Here is the thing: when you use this as a response, I just feel like you could be misunderstood as someone who was already didn't really push back.
Okay.
So you want to think about, so here is how you always think about weaknesses. You always want to think about weaknesses or areas where you need to have improvements in the terms of how it actually engages with you in terms of like, it's actually a positive. So imagine that how you take on more things and try to get it done. Like something like that. You know what I mean? Like you don't want to come up with a very, an issue where it's a harder one. Like it comes out as a little bit of like a negative on your end. You want to almost think about like that you have a personality, for example, to move fast and break things, and maybe that's what helped you learn a lesson to be more process oriented or something. But you could also say in that scenario that was the best thing we could do. You know what I mean? That's kind of the weakness you want to kind of show.
Okay.
So just think about that, but I would like much rather see something like that, because here is what it could be misunderstood as. It could be misunderstood as something that where you are actually a solid guy, but at the same time, one of the things that we put in as a feedback at Google, for example, is that do you question the authority? And it almost feels like in your case, you gave an example where you didn't question the authority or didn't push back, and so it kind of hurt you already. So you want to not be in that state. Okay. So it kind of works both ways. It kind of works. I wouldn't worry too much about it, but I just want you to think about scenarios where you actually fail because you did something fast, or scenarios where you like. Give you an example. Sometimes people, the weakness is work-life balance. They want to work hard, so that kind of is positive, but at the same time, you can't go too long with it. Something like that. So it's a tricky question where they're trying to see how you think about it. But you also want to have a scenario where maybe you didn't run tests because you didn't have enough time to do it, and that's the lesson. But maybe the next version that you released, you ran these tests and allowed for the engineers to go to the testing point, right? Things like that. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So an integration where, I just thought that it wasn't going to be a big deal, but it ended up being a big deal. So I thought that something wasn't going to be a big deal, and because we had a tight deadline, I decided to skip it, and then later on, it came back to hurt me.
Or you could say this is a lesson we learned, and we are going to improve upon it in the next cycle. Not like, hey, it hurt me, or it was negative, or it had negative, but more like, as part of this process and experience, I made some more adjustments to the product, and now we also have these processes in place to help us be more successful. Something like that. Okay. So let's talk about a few more like leadership related questions. Imagine that somebody disagrees with you in the room, like it's a consensus driven, and somebody, how would you go about dealing with that?
So a time that, so what do I do when someone disagrees with me? Maybe an idea or a product that I have, product idea?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, sure.
Product idea or some decision that everybody made to move forward. What was that?
Sure. So actually this reminds me of a time that we ran into recently where I ran into a technical issue on our products.
Okay.
And conflict involved a technical lead on our team. So the main product at our company is called a surge report, and it is an on-demand report where anyone can run it whenever they want, and they can select companies and receive information on a company. It's a legacy application, and the engineering team had been working on a re-architecture of the system to process reports faster, right?
Mm-hmm.
There was no limits on this product at all. A report output could be one line or tens of millions of lines.
Okay.
And as a product manager, I sort of like this because of the open-ended nature of the reports that provided value to a customer. But the engineering lead approached me and asked me to limit the total output of the total size of a report, right?
Mm-hmm.
We're re-architecting it and they wanted to store the whole report in memory, but they said that they couldn't, it was unreasonable to have a server that could always handle a 20 gigabyte report in memory, right?
Okay, yep.
But for me, this is an issue because there definitely was some customers that needed these reports of this size, right?
Okay.
The technical lead was extremely adamant about this and wouldn't budge. They wanted a limit of 1 gigabyte for a report.
Okay.
They just said that reports bigger than 1 gigabyte is ridiculous. But like I said, on the product side, I like the open-ended nature of this reports, and I knew that customers were we did have some customers that were creating these very large reports, right?
Yeah.
So immediately I wanted to provide data to back all of this up. So I dug in and I looked at all the reports created in like the past 2 years, right?
Mm-hmm.
And definitely for sure, some of these larger reports did exist that were 25 gigabytes, but they were outliers. But there was a significant amount that were created in like the 1 to 10 gigabyte range, which would contradict what the technical lead wanted, right? So I took this data back to the engineers and they were able to see and they were able to compromise that, yes, there was a use case for these medium-sized range reports, right?
Yep.
But on my side, I did understand that having these static machines sitting around all the time was a waste of money, right?
Yeah.
So we were able to come to a compromise, and the engineering team agreed to have a limit of 5 gigabytes on the report. But on the product side, even though I realized that I had to compromise on some functionality, but I still needed to take care of like those larger customers. So I reached out to them and I spoke to them and I were able to migrate them to one of our batch processes that didn't rely so heavily on time and made sure that that still fit their needs. And we're able to move them to that process so they didn't lose any of their large files.
Okay, cool. So I think I really like this response overall. The way you talked about the disconnect that, or rather, I would say, the difference of opinion that was there and how you actually worked with them to prove it, and then corrected the whole thing. So awesome. I generally like this response from you. I don't have a lot of feedback here, so I'm going to jump. Anything you want to know?
No, I think that's good.
I like it. Yeah.
Cool. Is it okay to reuse some of these answers? So when the other time with this company, I had 4 interviews and they actually had 3 people ask me the same question, right?
Which one was that?
It was a company called Argo Group. It's a giant insurance company.
Okay.
And they asked me this, they didn't ask me the last one, but a time when I failed, right?
Yeah.
I had 3 different people ask me that question. Should I use the same response or should I try to have 4 or 5 different ones that I don't repeat, so I don't repeat throughout the course of the interview process?
Oh, I think it depends on what the processes are. If they're putting all this feedback at some point, then I think it's probably a good idea to have a slight different answers or rather different answers. So it also depends on who the receiver end is. Like if they're all engineers, then I think it's okay to, or rather if they're all PMs, then it's okay to answer one in one way. But if you have like a director, a VP, and a peer, and some engineer, then you want to at least maybe give a couple of examples that might be different.
That makes sense. Okay, yeah. So for data miner, I have one with a PM, a data scientist, and the VP of product. So I probably have different ones for each of those.
Yeah, or the ones for each of them, but you don't want the story to be too, like, if you could even say that, hey, I just, somebody also asked me the same question and here is what I think about it. You could also put it that way.
Okay.
So that way, you're not like telling the same story every. You're just being honest, like, hey, I had a similar conversation previously, and here is my response.
Okay, cool.
Okay, tell me about your leadership style.
Sure. So
okay, sure.
So as a PM, I'm actually leading 3 different teams, and I work very closely with the technical leads and the engineers across all of these teams. Uh, as a product manager, I know that I don't have any direct authority over any of these people on my teams, right? But rather, I need to get people to understand and follow my product vision through inspiring them by showing my mastery and command of the product and my product vision, right? So I work very closely with the engineers. I need to know the what, when, and why, and clearly communicate that to everyone on the team, right? It's my job to speak to the customer and understand what needs to be done and to pass that on to people that are much better at implementing than I am. And I need to respect when they say that there are architectural problems or technical problems and trust them, but I need to understand them and be able to speak their language because I can't be bossed around by them. I feel both sides need to be realistic and understand what we're trying to do as a company, right, to succeed in a product. I want to work with everyone that I'm working with, not only on the hard problems, but the easy ones as well.
Okay. So this is a good response. I would add a few things in terms of whenever somebody asks your leadership style. So what they're looking for is like, are you goal oriented? You get stuff done? Are you hands-on? What's your strategy to build consensus and relationships, like one-on-ones? Are you committed to getting stuff done with your engineers? You give credit to people, right? Do you take the fault? Like you take ownership of the problem.
Right.
Those are the things that you want to kind of highlight.
How in your mind or at Google and at your work, what is your relationship with the actual, like not the technical lead, but the engineers implementing and stuff like that?
Well, what is my relationship with them?
Yes.
So it depends on, let's say in my case, I am probably a couple of levels above them. So
Sure.
I'm really focused on giving them the vision, not micromanage,
Sure.
setting the deadlines, being aggressive, but at the same time understanding, data-driven, believe in relationship more than just the product. Like give credit, share credit with the team, things like that.
Okay.
So yeah, that's how I would say. I think you should prepare your questions around the leadership question as well.
Okay.
And so that really helps.
Another question I get a lot is actually every interview so far is when they look at my resume and they ask me why I switched from being a DevOps engineer.
Yeah.
Right. So I usually say something like, as a DevOps engineer, I worked on the infrastructure a lot. And I was amazed with the way that we were ingesting all of our data and processing it and organizing it. Because I worked on the front lines of that, after a while, I realized that I cared more about how the data was being used and what the product did downstream. And not that I didn't care, right? But that's truly what I was more interested in, and how all these disparate pieces and disparate data points came together to provide value to a customer. I loved working with the customers, our partnerships as a DevOps team with the other companies, interested in what was next for the company in terms of product roadmap, strategic vision, and why decisions were being made. So when I saw an opening within my own company, I made the jump.
Got it. Yeah, I think that's perfectly a nice answer. You could also add, you like to think about business.
Okay.
You like to think about why something gets built versus just building it. Like you like to know the how, the why, you like to work with your customers and really empathize and really understand them. Like just think about all the natural product manager qualities, right? So it's about moving the business forward. It is about understanding the users and reducing their pain points. It's about growing the business. It's about making things that are useful. It's about working with people. Like you can say those things and that would highlight your strength around it.
Okay, cool. Cool. And then another one that I get is a situation where things didn't go as planned and how I manage that.
Yeah.
Can I run that by you?
Sure.
Cool. So I worked on another integration that we call internally the Facebook integration. And
Okay.
this foray into social media integrations. And this product would allow us to create audiences for their advertising platform and then create audiences based on our intent data, right? And the customer would be able to target these people within Facebook for advertisements. We had done some market research and decided that there were enough current customers willing to pay for this and external new customers as well. And through market research, we determined that we had a goal of like $1 to $1.5 million in revenue for the first year. And with technical stakeholders and the customer success team members on how we would onboard customers, and we began to scope out the work. We prototyped it. We got some beta customers, and it worked. But actually, if we fast forward a month and a half through this process, we were about a week away from going live. But at that exact moment, Cambridge Analytica happened with Facebook, and they severely throttled our API. And because of the way that our audiences were built, we were using literally millions of API calls, and we just weren't able to do that anymore with Facebook. So everyone went nuts. The salespeople went nuts, the executive went nuts, and because I'm a product lead, I had to make some decisions. So immediately I tried to contact Facebook through internal contacts, developer portal, submitted tickets, and we just didn't hear anything from them. So at that point, all signals were pointing to the API wasn't going to satisfy our needs. Thankfully, I found out that the UI for uploading audiences actually still accepted an unlimited number of audiences. So UI was still functional, fully functional. So I decided that as a stopgap until we heard back more from Facebook, that we could quickly spin up a team of internal members, some interns, and then some more medium level audience solutions, what we call the audience solutions team. And I helped the engineering team write some scripts to aid them uploading these audiences to the UI, and basically put together some onboarding guides, some step-by-step business flows for them, and put together a team that could handle sort of this interim period of uncertainty with Facebook. So we still went live through this process, and we were able to hit some of our early revenue numbers. It was slow and frustrating, but Facebook finally lifted the restrictions on the API, and we were able to go back to our original solution. But we made sure that we could, in the interim, hit all of our goals with our customers. And for the end customer, it was actually transparent, and nothing appeared any different from them. So on the outside, it was a success, but on the inside, it was extremely hectic and almost a failure internally.
Got it. Okay, cool. So, so I think that you touched upon all the things. One thing I would say, generally speaking, as sounding like some of the things that you mentioned, you want to be a little bit more structured. Like first this happened, then I did this, then this happened. Like so that there is a very clear, like almost like you are telling a very nice story through the flow. But your response actually was pretty good. And you also want to throw in a few more, in most cases, like, hey, so I stepped up or I took the initiative. Like you want to show and almost do a little bit of show off of how you are very much like proactive and took care of it in your response.
Okay.
Cool. So I would add a little bit to that as well. Any other questions that you have?
I'm looking at my notes here. 1 second. Sure. I also get asked on how I would create a product roadmap.
Okay.
More than just how do I prioritize features, but an actual product roadmap.
Okay, let's do that.
Okay, cool. So a product roadmap initially starts with me and some of our other internal product managers. The first thing that we try to do is align on the high-level objectives for the organization. Are we trying to get new customers? Are we trying to increase satisfaction, increase revenue, right? These sort of things. And we decide on sort of what time scale we want these things to happen on. After that, we try to, while we're doing that, we're also trying to identify the relevant metrics, right? Is it the number of logos that we're trying to get, the number of net new customers, basically quantify everything that we're trying to accomplish before creating any feature ideas, right?
Yeah.
Also look at the customer segment, deciding who to focus on. And maybe our current customers are not our current segment, and maybe they are. Then we start to look at what some of our existing customers are asking for, existing customers, existing problems from the engineering team. Maybe we need to set aside time for re-architectures, those sort of things, pain points within the organization. And then from there, we try to prioritize these features, whether they're net new ideas internally from a customer or from the engineering team. And we look at things like the impact and the urgency and the cost. And then we sort of try to, after we know the feasibility of these, sort of a quick feasibility check of these ideas, we try to get a timeline of these features, right? And understanding if there are any interdependencies within these features, what needs to come first to have other things happen, right? This is generally when we bring in the engineers to help determine these estimates. And then we also try to think about all of the assumptions that we have and sort of maybe have backup plans. Maybe this large feature sucks that has many downstream dependencies. What are we going to do if that plan fails, right?
Yeah.
And we'll have contingency plans.
Okay, cool.
From there, we try to have, in my current organization, we try to have bi-monthly roadmap meetings where we present the current status of the roadmap this year and then into the future to internal stakeholders and the executive team.
Okay. Okay. Is it?
Yeah, that's
at the end of the response. Okay, perfect. So seems like roadmap question was really around how do you strategize your product and what you want to. I think you covered some of the areas where you do what's your logistics to manage it and so on. But I think something you should think about is maybe again, think about the example here of what you did already for one of your products.
Okay.
So that really would set you apart, right? Like, hey, I was planning for a product roadmap and I've been doing it best for a year, where we started out with the core functionality, the MVP, then we did the fixing of the bugs and the second version planning, and then like what would this product look like 2 years down the line. So it's really you should give an example here if possible, and then walk through each of these steps.
So should I talk about the organization's roadmap, or is it like my roadmap that I have for my teams that I'm working on?
I think you should talk about a product roadmap, like give a product example and then give a product roadmap.
Okay. All right. So maybe like some of these integrations that I've been talking about, the roadmap.
Yes, exactly. So that's very critical. And generally, if you are in-person meeting, if this is an in-person meeting, you would draw it on the whiteboard with timelines and dates and everything.
Okay.
So one thing, Ben, I'm kind of trying to figure out with you, and I was wondering if you're okay with that, is let's do a few of these questions offline. Like reframe some of these questions and respond to me. Whether if you want to record it, I'm okay with it. If you want to write it up, you can send it to me.
Sure.
But I would like you to do that because I would like to see an improvement over that. So if you're okay with it, all the questions that we covered today, I would like you to take one more stab at it so that it really comes to you naturally.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah, I'll send you some written responses over the next week.
Okay, so that would be great.
Cool.
Okay, what else would you like to cover?
I think that's pretty good for the behavioral stuff. I was wondering, because I know the data miner's coming up, and obviously they talk a lot about event processing, scale of data, right? I was wondering if you had any questions off the top of your head, maybe that you asked people about, I don't know, Gmail or YouTube or anything like that, right? On scale of data or event processing.
Yeah. So I think you should think about if it's data miner and they are really focused on processing, and you want to think about how would you build pipelines of data. I just look up what exactly data miner does. I heard about it like this.
Yeah, so they do real-time event processing for Twitter. So like if there's a school shooting, if there's a school shooting, they're processing Twitter and they're the first ones to know. And then they have partnerships with like CNN, NBC journalists, right? And they let the journalists know breaking news events in a region.
Okay. Okay, got it. Okay, so you should think about what that pipeline might look like.
Okay.
You should think about how could you scale this non-linearly? Like, is this very much a cost thing? Where if you want to scale this data miner as a platform, then how do you scale it? What are the biggest challenges right now, do you think, from a data miner standpoint? Where are they investing in it? Right? Things like that, I think, is always interesting. I can see that how would you use AI? I think they're big into AI. So how do you use AI for platform? And how is that used?
Okay.
You should think about, so those would generally be my questions. Like, how would you use AI to be able to detect these signals early? What would that processing look like and validate it? So I don't know how much you've done like machine learning.
Yeah. So actually, no, my current company is basically all based on NLP stuff.
Great. So then you should definitely bring that up, right? Like, hey, I actually built something similar like this, for example.
Okay, right. Yeah, and I've been reading through their engineering blogs, right? Trying to understand some of their current architecture and some of the stuff they're doing. Okay.
So I would do that. So that would be my general feedback to you. You should talk about scalability. Like, how do we go from, does it scale up and down quickly, or is this something that stays static? What is their current stack look like?
Okay.
What do they use? Where, like I said, what kind of failures have they seen? How do you make sure that redundancy is there as a PM?
Okay.
And so it doesn't fail. Maybe they're using AWS in the back end, I don't know, but maybe they're running their own set of systems. Like that level of detail would really help.
Sure. Let me show you the application page.
Sure.
I put it in chat. Yeah.
This is the job profile.
Yes. And see, this is absolutely the most interested I have been in any of the job opportunities.
Yeah.
Right? This is one that I would love working at, and I have personal interest in. I love the news. I take pride in like knowing breaking news first, and from like my friend group and stuff like that. It has a lot of overlap with my current work that I've done in terms of processing events at Bombora, right? News events. So I'm really excited about this opportunity.
Yeah, it's really aligned with some of the things you've done. So you can talk about, like, I think they're really stressed on APIs. So look at that API right now and think about how, I think one of the questions might be like, how do you integrate an API into your platform? Is it third party? What does the checklist look like? That's a question I generally sometimes ask as well. But what would a checklist to integrate an API look like? What are the current features that you would like to add? How do you go about adding them? How do you prioritize between those features?
So what do I do, Jamal? Their API, they have no public documentation at all, right? Like this is a company that only sells to the enterprise, really. So there is no public facing documentation.
Got it. But you can just look at general API stuff then. Like talk about how do you test an API? What would this, for example, the things you would do, let's say if you're doing APIs, you look at how many responses it can serve, what's the performance look like, what is the security solution looking like, what is the privacy issues here, like what's your checklist basically, like understanding API and how do you do that and how do you define the roadmap for an API, like how do you prioritize between the different use cases, or rather do feature requests.
Okay.
So you really want to show that you've already done some of these things.
Okay. So at Google, for example, someone working on, I don't know, someone that really doesn't have engineering experience, right?
Mm-hmm.
Are they asked these questions at well? Say I went to Lyft or Uber or something like that for a product generalist position.
Yeah.
Are product managers expected to know this?
You are expected to know at least like high-level API stuff, and this is a very API-focused role.
Mm-hmm.
So they are talking about like comfortable talking about APIs and integration as well as brainstorming. So you need to know how you integrate. Yes, Short answer is if there's a PM, yes.
Okay.
At least at the companies you mentioned, Lyft, Uber, Google, they're very like they at least can do some amount of technical stuff. So that's expected.
Okay. Could you give me, they also mentioned experience like working with like wireframes and mockups. Can you tell me what, I haven't actually had one of those yet. Can you explain what a question would be like when they're like, would you mock up this UI interface? Do I just go to the whiteboard and explain the features that I would expect it to have?
No, you not only features that you have, but even draw them out. So like with boxes and text in them. So that's what the wireframe looks like. They're mostly like boxes and text. And here I would search bar and just like buttons and things like that.
Okay. Yeah, so I haven't had one of those yet. Is that fairly common to be asked?
Yes. Yes. Okay. They are almost part of the design question.
Okay.
Where somebody says, hey, build a new app for budgeting. Then you can actually need to go page by page to show what an app, what every screen on the app might look like.
Okay. All right.
So you should, if you're not done the practice, then one, I can help you with that if you want to do additional stuff, but otherwise there are examples out there as well.
Sure.
So you can look it up.
I'm sure I can find something on YouTube.
Yeah, exactly. You will see a bunch of examples on YouTube. So if you want practice on that, let me know.
Okay. Cool. And then, I know we're running out of time here, but all of these interviews that I've had, obviously I haven't had an in-person one yet, right? But they're willing to hire completely through a Zoom process.
Yes.
Do you have any advice on, I can't, give off energy in person? Do you have any advice just for a video interview process that is entirely through video?
Well, I think you should, you should be pretty, as a PM, you want to be a little bit more relaxed, right? Mm-hmm. It's easy to not relaxed, especially on video. Like it's very hard to see your body language and everything. So more relaxed, you are like smiling. I did 3 interviews last week on Google Hangout, and I would say just generally be very cool about it, right? Like just relax, smile, things like that. Just standard stuff.
Gotcha. Okay.
Okay.
Cool.
I'm happy to answer any questions you have offline. So if you want to send me your responses, if you want to record them and send it to me, I'm more than happy to review it for you.
Right. Okay.
And as a next step, I would say ping me if you want me to connect to, like look up at LinkedIn. And if you want to make connections of recruiters through that, I'm happy to do that. But look at the companies that are still hiring, and then you can kind of have your messaging according to that.
Sure. Yeah, actually, let me pass you a site that I saw. It may be useful for you. Yeah, this might be useful for you and some students. I just saw this today. It's an updated list of what tech companies are in hiring freezes.
Okay, and have you seen the one where the opposite of this, which is I just saw a site where they're still hiring. I'll send it to you. And you might, I don't know whether you've seen this site, but it's actually also gives you a good idea about the pay of PMs and everything. And it's actually pretty accurate because I know internal Google. So, but they just started this site where they track all the companies that are hiring.
Gotcha. Okay.
It's funny they said ZipRecruiter, and I just in the morning I saw a note how ZipRecruiter is like firing or the laying off 400 people. So
okay.
Weird times, man.
Yeah, and that's why I'm a little bit stressed out and discouraged because I mean, my company is still a startup, right? And if this lasts much longer than like 6 months, right? Our CEO told us that we're gonna have issues.
You'll be fine, man. You just need to keep at it. Write blogs, publicize yourself. Go talk to people directly. You'll be fine. I was doing another PM interview training with Norleen. She's a director at PayPal, and she's been taking training, and she has like 2 interviews lined up next week. Like one with Chime, one with Gusto, for example. So there are companies out there. Just keep your head down and just focus. Don't worry about all these news and all that. You never know. It will hit and you will get it. So don't worry about it.
Okay.
Cool. Again, happy to do anything I can do in terms of from your standpoint, and then please let me know if you're looking for connections through LinkedIn. I'm happy to make those connections. Okay.
Okay.
And I'll send you this recording after I finish it.
Yeah, could you actually send me the first one too?